Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, Vision OS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show. Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Vision Pros. Joining me today, once again, is Joseph Simpson. He was on episode 22 of this podcast back in August of 2024. He joins us again today to discuss a lot of different topics, including the Apple Vision Pro 1 year later, and some updates on his apps, looming deadlines, plus a new project he's been working on called StepInto.Vision, which is a resource for developers to learn how to get into vision development. We also discuss a lot of different Vision Pro hackathons that have been going on over the past year, including the Vision Hack, MIT Reality Hack, where he was a Vision OS mentor, and a new project that he has in the work called Dark Spaces, which is a pretty cool project that you'll hear about shortly. So lots to dive into in this episode. I hope you enjoy it. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. And by signing up for the Patreon or by subscribing to Apple Podcasts, you'll get both this podcast and iPad Pros early. And my great thanks to everyone that does support the show. It means a great deal. And if you aren't able to support the podcast financially, another great thing to do is just leave a review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every review goes a long way in helping send the right signals to help others discover the show. With that, here's my interview with Joseph. Enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So it's been quite the year, and we're, full year in the Vision Pro now. We last spoke looking at the August 2024, so kind of like the summer after Vision OS 2 is kind of getting ready to launch and all that.
Yeah, it's a busy summer.
So what have you been up to since then? Like, what would have been some of your big highlights? I know we spoke about Project Graveyard and looming deadlines. I guess let's start with that. Where do those apps stand today? Are they feature complete where you want them to be, or are they, moved on to other projects at this point?
Definitely not feature complete. So Project Graveyard, I had a release coming out last time we talked about it. And I guess let me caveat this. Project Graveyard is entirely a hobby project. So I don't really spend a ton of time on it.
It's not something you expect to make a living off of, kind of thing.
No, it's free. It's free on the App Store.
Yeah.
The whole app is a joke of, bury your dead project.
Yeah. It's a fun thing and probably useful for you to just learn the dev environment, right?
Yeah. So I did a 2.0 version of that came with Vision OS 2 in September. It had a bunch of changes to how the Swift UI, the Swift data syncing worked, and kind of refined the gestures a little bit over the first version, and redid the way that kind of a menuing system. So you've got the volume for the graveyard, but there's also any UI for like editing the text and customizing stuff like that. So I did that as a separate window. So that release is out there. I've kind of noodled on a few things since then. I've got some ideas to like kind of do an environment around the graveyard. So like a skybox with some animated clouds and some better audio and things like that. I've made some progress on that, but I haven't shipped anything yet because it's been kind of busy with other stuff. So Looming Deadlines is the other project that we talked about last summer. And unfortunately, it is currently in limbo or maybe on the back burner forever. I think aside from you and I and one of my friends, no one else has any enthusiasm for that project. I tried to drum up some excitement for it. I had a
it's the hollow. It's the hollow man. You should be working thing in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still use it myself, but unfortunately the test flight version has expired, so I'm the only one who can use it right now.
And it never made it to the App Store, sadly. Yeah.
No, never made it that far. I mean, I had a test flight open. Project Graveyard is a small app, but I did a test flight for that and got a couple hundred people, and then I did a test flight for Looming Deadlines and got literally zero.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one would click the link. I'm like, come on, it's the same people.
I know. Yeah, it's such a small community, as we all know, and it's interesting what people are interested in, for sure.
Yeah. Now, Looming Deadlines was particularly good because it taught me a bunch of stuff about working with Windows and Vision OS. I ended up writing a mini series of kind of advanced techniques or things that aren't necessarily obvious when you're first diving into Vision OS. So
Hmm.
how to how to entangle two windows together so if one of them is closed, the other one can reopen it, how they can open relative to one another instead of just in that default position. And I ended up using a lot of that code in Project Graveyard and several other projects. And I also, all the stuff I learned with that window management stuff, I wrote into kind of what started as like a 12-part mini series of labs and examples. And then that turned into like, I need a better place to publish this stuff than my personal website. So that kind of led me to a new website that I've been working on ever since.
Very cool. And that's called StepInto.Vision?
StepInto.Vision. So StepInto.Vision. I launched this almost a week or two after we talked. So I had been thinking about this for a while, but I hadn't picked a name, doesn't want a domain. And the first version that I shipped was just like, let me just get something out there and just kind of soft launch the entire site in early access. And it was more important to have, a publicly accessible site that didn't look great, but I could post content to than like trying to have the perfect site. So
Yeah, because VR Hermit is kind of your everything site. So it's got
mhm.
like everything there, and Step in the Vision is more like it has like stuff like Round 2 with Quest Pros, a post I see here. So it's got older stuff, and but with Step in the Vision, it's purely Vision OS and helping
Mhm.
developers learn, right?
Yeah, VR Hermit is my personal blog where I post some technical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just, I also post personal articles and, thoughts about books I'm reading or games I've played, stuff like that. So it's entirely a personal blog. Just happens to have some technical stuff on it as one of the categories. Where StepInto.Vision is entirely for Vision OS developers. It is not necessarily a blog. It is more of an example code site. So I'm kind of using blogging tools to build it, but the main content is example code. So short, bite-sized examples of how to do common things. And I'm trying to make stuff useful for Vision OS developers, but also for people who are either coming from Unity development or web development, or people who are coming from iOS development. So trying to kind of explain things in terms that they're used to.
Right, because meta developers work in Unity primarily, right? So if they
Yeah,
wanted to make an app here, they would need to change how they develop in a big way.
not
No?
necessarily. You can do Unity development for Vision OS, but that's going to be a fully immersive VR title essentially.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
If you want to make a native app with native windows and volumes and platform system features, then you're going to want to use RealityKit and Swift UI. So I'm covering things from that standpoint. I'm not telling anyone how to make games or anything like that. There's no focus on game development on my site. It's more about starting with that series that I did on Windows, expanding that to volumes and immersive spaces. And then I think I dove into system gestures. So Swift UI has a ton of gestures that we use on iPhone and iPad, and Apple adapted those for use in spatial computing, where we can take those same gestures. They work the same way out of the box on Swift UI views, but they added some additional functionality that we can use them with 3D content in RealityKit. So I did a series on how to work with system gestures. That's probably been between the windowing and the gestures, that's like the most useful stuff that I've published so far. I get a ton of people thanking me for that stuff. It's been used in classrooms and universities, workshops and stuff like that. So I am trying to build more series similar to that. So I've got just a massive roadmap, but I can only do so much. It's fairly time-consuming work. So I've got 2 new series that I've been tinkering on called Spatial Swift UI, which just covers, from the Swift UI 2D perspectives, some of the things that Apple has done to make Swift UI a little bit more spatial. So whether that's just adding some depth effects to 2D views or decorating your windows with ornaments and toolbars and things like that, documenting some of that stuff. And then I've also got a RealityKit basics. So RealityKit is the kind of the 3D engine that Apple developed for. They did develop it before Vision Pro, but they obviously developed it with the intention of spatial computing in mind. And it interfaces really well with Swift UI, but it's not the most documented thing in the world, and it's not always intuitive of how to get started and how
That's
to do
shocking.
certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so, something that's catching my eye is your lab 33, teleportation with spatial tap gesture. Now, moving in the environment, you can of course walk around, but you obviously don't want to do that because for most instances, because I think there's actually a bubble where in Vision OS you can't leave, kind of thing. So I'm remembering back to the PSVR 1 days where you had move controllers without even a joystick. And they had to do clever things like you point your controller one way and there's a move button where that'll indicate, let me move towards that direction. What's, if you want to move in Vision OS and this comes kind of the fully immersive mode, what are the solutions Apple's come up with so far? Because you don't, of course, have joysticks or whatnot to deal with.
So Apple hasn't shared anything around locomotion that I'm aware of. The lab that you were talking about, I just did over the weekend or maybe last week, and that is the kind of the absolute minimum requirement for teleportation. There's no UI for that. There's no.
Oh yeah, and this we're talking about teleportation versus just moving with the with the move controller or whatever. You'd actually be walking towards that direction. But teleportation, whole other game where you're just jumping from point A to point B. Yeah.
So Apple hasn't done any official documentation or examples for that stuff. So that lab, I had done an earlier version of that last year on my personal site in the Camatorium lab, and then I adapted it this week for just to be a little bit easier to use. And essentially what happens is in this example, we've got just a flat object. It's like basically the top of a cylinder as the ground. And I can look anywhere on that and tap, and I will just immediately teleport to that point. There's no hover effect about where I'm looking. There's no indicator about where I'm tapping. So like I said, it's not ready to roll out to users, but it just demonstrates that the bare essentials of we can tap on this object and get some coordinates from that object and then convert that into a 3D coordinate that we can then use to translate the world. The weird thing about this, it's just an oddity of RealityKit, is if in Unity or WebXR, like Babylon.js, any other 3D environment I've ever worked, I would have some kind of entity that represents the player. And in Unity, this is often called like the VR rig, which includes the multiple, stereoscopic cameras and the hand controllers, things like that, all the components you want to define for your player. And then you would just move that. You would say, player.position, and then set its position to a new value. You can't do that in RealityKit. We can't move the player. Only the user can move themselves, which makes sense when you consider that most of the 3D content on Apple Vision Pro is designed for those AR experiences, where it doesn't really make sense to move the player when you can't actually physically move them in their room. So when we're dealing with a fully immersive thing, like a VR space where we do want to allow them to teleport, we can't move them. What we can do instead is move the entire world around them. So it's the same math, but just some of the orders flipped around, where instead of moving the player around, moving the player 1 meter forward, we're moving the entire world 1 meter back. World.
I see. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm so curious with Vision OS 3 if they introduce the Sense controllers with a joystick, if they'll address this and maybe vamp this up in a way that allows movement and teleportation in a more natural way.
Yeah, they could definitely wrap some of this stuff up into, like a convenient set of methods that we could call, where they would still have to do the same backwards math, but they could kind of flip it around for us to make it more intuitive. Yeah, I'm working on a Vision OS 3 wish list, and that's definitely on there. Just better ways to deal with teleportation, locomotion, user movement. Where is the user's head? I would love to be able to know things like, I don't need to know what the user is looking at, but what direction is the user facing? I would love to be able to say, if I have a scene with 12 items and I'm looking in one direction and I can see 4 of those, I would love to do something different with those other 8 items behind me. that they can't see, like do some kind of sleight of hand, change them, move them around, things like that.
There are games, I thought, that you're hitting like a ball with your head in Vision OS. They're getting around that limitation somehow.
You can know where the user's. See, there is a head tracked anchor where you can know where the user's head is. You just can't do anything about it. You can't change that on their behalf in the same way that you could in other platforms.
I see. Gotcha. As far as how you're using the Vision Pro now, how has it changed, in the past 6 months since we last talked, if any?
I don't think it's changed too much. I mostly use it for development and for work. I've been trying to find time to spend more hours using other people's experiences, but honestly, Xcode remains the killer app for me for Vision Pro.
Do you use the wide monitor mode?
I use the middle one. Yeah,
the middle one. That seems what most people land on, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the ultra wide is a funny tech demo and not particularly useful, particularly if you rely on the macOS menu bar quite a bit. It's just like, all right, well, I've got this window here, and the menu for it is 38 feet away. I
can see it being cool if you have a bunch of Mac games and you throw on like a race car game that's in the super wide mode or something like that.
Yeah, that would definitely be awesome. I did notice that I'd never noticed this before, but I noticed it the other day. The flat, standard resolution or standard aspect ratio virtual display that it's shipped with, that will also start to curve if you move it beyond a certain scale. Like once it gets big enough, it does start to. Yeah, I never noticed that.
And this is private APIs, we're guessing, because you could not do a curved thing the way they do it, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping we get that too. That's going to be on my list. Curved windows can definitely be overdone. Meta designed their entire UI around them, and it gets annoying after time.
Especially if you have multiple windows, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Have you run into weird instances of the curved virtual display when you're trying to use other windows with it? Does it make sense to you always to have it curved like it is?
It's been fine. If I stick with that wide aspect ratio, I wish they would kind of save user settings a little bit, because every time I turn it on, I always scale it down a little bit and move it further away. Like it's never exactly the right way I wanted.
I wish Windows could be much further away than they allow it to be. Occasionally there's a bug and it's like super far away. It's like, that's awesome. And then I change something and zooms right back up where the maximum distance is. And
yeah. The other thing, like one of the downsides about the ultra wide or the wide is that you tend to, one of the things I really liked about the regular version is you have this kind of standard aspect ratio right in front of you, and you could decorate it with your own additional windows around it. That's a little bit harder to do with the ultra wide or the wide.
Yeah, your decoration is above and below. I've found, like if you have a wide or ultra wide, you can put a bunch of stuff above or below it. But to the sides, it's like it's kind of pointless over there.
The one thing they could do on the Mac to make it much more usable, they have some basic windowing, like window snapping stuff that they rolled out recently, but I think they actually need to break the menu bar into like segments. So let me divide up my ultra wide into 3, virtual sections, and then just have the menu bar in that middle one, or repeat it on all 3.
That would be nice. And that would even be nice for people with giant Mac monitors,
exactly,
ultra wides, Because Bartender, that stuff just hides it to the far right or whatever. Still, like there's no way to put stuff in the middle, to my knowledge.
Yeah,
and it's also interesting because with the notch on laptops, I feel they need to do a lot of menu bar work in general to address the notch even better. I know people have stuff that just hides away in the notch, and they don't really address that too well, and so they could do a lot of work. And the middle thing is interesting because, like, the notch, if you have it set to middle, just be hidden.
Yeah. My menu bar, as we're talking right now, it has icons going pretty much up to 20 pixels away from the notch on the right. So I'm out of space.
Yeah. You're on a 16-inch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Vision Hack, when was this? You won an award at this hackathon.
Mm-hmm. So Vision Hack was in September. It was I think they called it the first global Vision OS hackathon. There have been a
Hmm.
couple other in-person ones and smaller events, but this was like a decentralized, all over the world at once. And so it was a virtual event. It took place over a weekend, and I think it kicked off Friday night, and I think it was like pencils down. I think around 6 p.m. on Sunday. I forget the
Okay.
exact times, but
So the idea
I've
was
been
you had
looking.
to start and finish in that time frame. You couldn't bring
Mm,
any
yep, don't bring
existing
any
code.
existing work,
Yep.
no existing assets, no existing work, things like that. Um, and I've been looking forward to it all summer. It was actually one of the test records that I had in looming deadlines of just kind of counting down to the reality hack,
Hmm.
along with counting down to the Vision OS 2 release. And I, yeah, I ended up kind of winning in a strange way.
Yeah.
So the idea
And
that I
as far
spent,
as the preparation for going into a hackathon, do you have like notes of ideas you want to try out going into that, or
yeah,
what's kind of the
so I had an idea.
preparation? Yeah.
I had an idea that I wanted to make, and it's actually similar to Project Graveyard. So the idea was going to be basically an idea tracker in space, where instead of graves or things like that, it would be light bulbs. So a 3D light bulb to represent each idea, and then you could adjust the brightness for good ideas, bright ideas, or make them really dim for bad ideas. Have some different colors, arrange them in 3D around you. So that was, that's as far as I had thought about the idea. Like I'm going to have light bulbs. I know we have dynamic lights in Reality Kit, so I can make virtual lights that actually shine real light. And that's as far as I got. And I started right after Friday. I didn't join a team. I just decided to work on my own, which I kind of regret. Maybe next year, if I participate, I'll definitely join a team and make it more of a group activity. But I went in on my own, and I spent half of the hackathon just failing. Um, I couldn't figure out how to get the virtual lights to shine on the pass-through environment. I have since learned how to do that, but just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, didn't help me in September.
Yeah, because
I couldn't figure out.
the opposite happens just by default. Like if there's lights in your room,
Yeah,
they'll shine in your windows, which I find just a
yeah,
mind-blowing touch. That does Meta do this like with their AR stuff? If there's lights, will the lights reflect onto their own windows and stuff like that?
a little bit.
A
Yeah,
little bit, yeah.
I
Okay.
haven't paid as much attention. Actually have a. I don't know if you can see it
I
behind
see
me.
some Oculus boxes back there. Yeah, what are
Yeah,
those?
I'm boxing everything up to get rid of everything. So,
Oh, I see. Okay.
um, but yeah, so I couldn't figure out how to get the virtual lights to shine on the pass through, which was kind of the nut of the idea. And then I also ran into a limitation of Reality Kit, which is they introduced virtual lights, but you can only have 8 of them per scene. And I have more than 8 ideas. I have 50 or 60 at any given time that I wanted to organize. So that wasn't going to be viable at all. As soon as I got to that limitation, I tried to work around it with like maybe I can use emissive materials for some of the lights. And they had some documentation on how to like overload emissive materials to kind of make it look brighter than it is, but it just didn't look right with what I was doing.
Yeah, this is a challenge. I remember Sandwich with the theater talking to me about he was trying to the projector coming behind you would be cool if the lights would come out of that, and lights in the environment can be definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So I spent half of the weekend. By Saturday, I'd worked all night Friday and until about 3 or 4 on Saturday. And I was like, okay, I've tried everything I can. I basically wasted half the hackathon and I have nothing to show for it. So I went and had dinner. I took a long walk. I was about to just drop out. Like coming back from the walk, I was like, I'm just gonna, hop in the Discord and admit defeat and, offer to help anybody else. And then I had another idea. Um, why, I was feeling sorry for myself, feeling a little bit emotional. Like I can make other people feel emotional too. So I pivoted to an idea about failing the hackathon. So I used the light bulb that I had. I created an entirely black environment where you just have a single light bulb and you reach out for it, as in reaching for your idea. You just tap it and it falls on the ground and goes out. And then after a certain time, another light bulb shows up somewhere else around you. And it was just this environment where you can have as many ideas as you want, but every time you reach for them, they fall apart. And just a very simple environment. You're kind of in this black dome. You can move the light bulbs around. You can see all the other light bulbs that have burned out on the floor. And yeah, that was it. And apparently that was enough. If you can't win on technical prowess, then just make people feel a little bit sad.
Yeah, I love it. That's cool. What other projects did you see there that got hacked up?
There was a ton. It was like watching the people share their projects at the end of Sunday night. Everybody had like 5 minutes to show what they had. It was just incredible stuff. My favorite, it was called Cardboard Cutout. I forget the developer, but it was this just phenomenal idea of taking 2D drawings and graphics, things like that, removing backgrounds from them. So say you have like a little picture of a train or a car or a croissant or something like that. And then he was creating these as, I'm not sure if they were attachments or planes or what, but give you a library of these things and you could draw them and just place them around the world like stickers. And because you're working in 3D, you could have items behind each other, overlapping. It was this really cool idea. He ended up shipping that to the App Store.
Nice.
Out there.
Do you know what it's called?
Cardboard Cutout.
Cardboard Cutout? Okay, cool.
But yeah, there was a ton of really good stuff. Definitely anyone listening, go look at the Vision Hack website for the submissions.
Okay, so those will all live there. And they share them how? Because like experiencing Vision OS apps is kind of hard unless you're in them at times. You can do the screen.
So many of them have made it to the store. They've also, a lot of people open source their projects if you want to go check them out. They've got a Notion board that just has like the submission materials. So like at the very least of the description in a video if you just want to see what they've built. But in that board, they've also indicated which ones have won prizes and who shipped to the store and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool ideas. And I particularly like everyone who shared their stuff publicly.
Very cool. And then you were also a part of the MIT Reality Hack, but not as a hackathon person, but as a mentor, a Vision OS mentor. So is this a hackathon for multiple platforms, and was it geared at students doing this, or?
So it is hosted by students, not necessarily for students.
Okay.
So it's an official event at MIT, hosted by a student organization. It has been going on for well over 10 years. So definitely
in
not
person
even
event.
Specific. Yes.
Okay.
Only in person. They actually had a special exception this year. There was a kind of a pop-up supplemental hackathon in LA to raise awareness and funds for the LA fires, but the main hackathon was at MIT's campus in Boston.
So this is very recent then.
Yeah, this was 3 weeks ago, I think.
Okay, so you went out to Boston for this?
Yep.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, so my work on StepInto.Vision and just sharing code over the last year, they were looking for mentors, and they had asked one of the existing mentors who was coming, hey, do you know any developers who would be good at mentoring this stuff? And yes, I do. You should talk to Joseph. So they invited me out. It was a volunteer opportunity. I didn't get paid for it or anything, but it was just a fun way to kind of give back to the community, work with different teams, but honestly, just meet other amazing mentors. The group of Vision OS mentors was just incredible. We ended up having kind of our own private lounge area away from the hackathon where we needed to regroup or just rest, and we used that space to kind of give each other tech demos and talk about what we were working on and presentations, stuff like that. So just to me, like the hackathon itself was fun, but the really like rewarding part was hanging out with the other mentors.
Yeah, no, that sounds very, very cool. And so it's been going on for 10 years, so it's probably shifted as far as, platforms, of course.
Yeah.
Was Vision OS was Vision OS like the lead platform this year, or no, not at all? Meta is probably the
There were probably 6 Vision OS teams and maybe 70 or 80 Quest teams. So yeah, we actually had more Vision OS mentors than we needed. Because I'm guessing,
you develop for what you have access to, and Meta Quests are probably all over. Like they're just so ubiquitous,
Well, they're all over, but also Meta supported the event and Apple didn't.
Oh, so they would actually supply hardware.
Yeah, Meta showed
Okay.
up with 15 employees and mentors and technical experts and brought headsets for teams to use, and Apple didn't acknowledge the existence of the event.
Yeah, Apple
So
needs to work on that stuff. Like,
they really do.
yeah,
I,
that's yeah, not great. Yeah.
I understand they can't support every community event, but this is MIT. Like,
Yeah, that's a big name. And this is
I
a
think you can make an
long running
exception.
event, and yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. And it better not be something like, oh, Meta's there too. We don't want to be associated with them. Because Apple's arrogance at times can lead to stuff like that.
I get the impression that it's more of a, if we do this one, we'll have to do all of them. And I'm like, I don't think so.
No, definitely not. And then,
But
any cool projects from that worth sharing?
so there was about 6 native Vision OS projects and another 6 using a third-party tool with Unity. So there was some like Vision OS native stuff and some Vision OS Unity stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The one that really stood out to me was this really cool team who made a basically like they like reading physical books, but they wanted to kind of augment a book with spatial computing. So they did a concept, basically using a child's book as a proof of concept, where you open the book, the image recognition from the headset recognizes a particular image on the page and fills in some virtual content around them. So things like showing animations or playing sound effects and just kind of like augmenting the story that you're experiencing as you go. And then flipping pages and get more stuff. They actually, had a very late edition of like, okay, now we're in VR. Our headset can see the book, but we can't see it because we took away the pass-through. So we like show them how to like carve out a little box of pass-through space inside their virtual environment so they can kind of see what they were looking at. Yeah, it was really a neat idea.
So it's augmenting a book. Does it know what's on the book itself? Like, would it change book to book?
In this case, they actually had to hard code the images into the app for the proof of concept. So Apple would need to open up some additional APIs to make it more, to actually make it viable as a product.
Yeah, that'd be so cool if you could scan a book and have different things per book, and publishers would get on board. Yeah, that'd be neat.
What they could do instead, though, is like work with a publisher of a specific book and make
an app for that book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was another one. This wasn't a Vision OS specific one, but it was a WebXR demo or WebXR project, and it was probably my favorite from the scene, from the whole hackathon. It was called Journalify, and it was a way for parents and kids to kind of create journals together. So they would just be talking to each other in natural language, and a little AI bot would be kind of populating a scene around them. With little 3D objects or generating images and just kind of filling things in. So like, tell me about your day. What did you have for lunch? Oh, we had pizza, and a little pizza pops in. And what did you do at recess? And we play with a baseball. And a little baseball pops in. Just things like that. It was a very kind of wholesome experience. In particular, I'm not sure if this made it.
Yeah, that's just such a cool idea. Like, so it's voice guiding you through, and you just talk back, and it'll fill like the space with those objects. So you're journaling, and you can like capture what that day was like. And if you're not
like searching a database of objects, while you're trying to just talking.
Yeah, and if your days aren't the same every single day, day in and day out, that's pretty neat. For some people, as you're an adult, it's like, oh, it's Groundhog's Day again. But as a kid, your life is much more exciting. I hope. Yes.
Yeah, that was a great one. But yeah, there is a website from Reality Hack that has all the submissions. If you go to, let's see, MITrealityhack.com, there is a link to the 2025 projects. So anybody can go. Now, one of the things that's about the MIT hackathon is all of the projects have to be open source to be eligible. So you can go download all of this stuff and try the stuff. So there's Unity projects, there's WebXR projects, there's Vision OS projects. I would definitely encourage people to go.
So WebXR, that's the journal was in WebXR. So would that live on a website that you could just use it at? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they could. I hope that team stays together and turns it into a product, because I think it's just a fantastic idea.
It's a cool idea, and you could you could sync that to phones in some way, and like,
in fact, their version worked. Their version wasn't a VR specific thing. It worked with VR headsets, but also phones and
because you
laptops
could
and
like
things
be
like that.
talking to your phone, and then you put in the headsets like, here's the full manifestation of what you talked about there.
Yep.
It'd be neat if you could ask, like, you could integrate with Spotify or Apple Music. Is there, what song best, encapsulates today, kind of thing. Like, that would be just, I don't know, you load up that day and like that song plays, and I don't know.
Yeah. Ton of great ideas.
So you have a new project in the works, Dark Spaces is the code name. What can you share about this?
So it's code name because I don't have a product name, not because I'm hiding it or anything.
I mean, Dark Spaces is a cool name. I mean,
it is. It's a little too descriptive of what I'm making, which is just a bunch of dark spaces.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been working on this basically since November, I think. After, I'm working on StepInto.Vision. I'm working on some consulting projects and things like that. And I'm doing a lot of very technical stuff. And I wanted a project that skews more artistic. So less technical stuff and more just making things for the sake of making things. And one of the ways that I've always loved using VR headsets is just as places to think. So a simple environment, often kind of a low stimulus environment. I don't want like a photorealistic recreation of a rainforest with, tons of sound effects. I find that overwhelming.
You don't want like
it's a nice.
Think a jaguar is going to hunt you down any moment here.
Yeah, like Apple's immersive videos are great little things to sample, but I do not want to hang out for an hour in one of those environments.
Yeah.
Those are overwhelming.
The moon would be probably the tamest of the bunch, I'd say.
Yeah. So I've been making kind of, for years, in WebXR platforms or even in Unity, I've made myself kind of low stimulus environments. Just simple environment with low poly assets or just geometric shapes or just, skies made out of gradients, things like that. So I'm kind of using that same idea for this project of making a bunch of dark spaces using just a small number of materials, like a black and white sky and some shiny materials, some very matte materials, concrete and stone, working on some kind of reflective glass material, maybe a mirror material, and just kind of building interesting places with these, and mostly thinking about it as constraining myself to a small number of things rather than spending a ton of time on asset creation in Blender or Maya. Just like come up with some great materials and then mix them together in certain ways to create these environments. And I've done quite a few small scenes for myself, and I've kind of teased some of that over the last couple of months. But since I decided to turn this into a project, I started a devlog section of the site, and I'll be sharing. So on StepInto.Vision, I'll be sharing devlogs, as I work on this. But the idea is to get. This isn't going to be a game, but it's going to have some kind of game-like mechanics. So like maybe you go into an environment and look around to unlock an additional environment.
I see. Yeah.
But these are not, there's nothing to do there. Like the whole purpose is to have a place to go and think. So listen to music on your headset, or maybe stub in some white noise or black noise or gray noise, things like that. I also thought about, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do this, but I've been playing around in Logic, like making chords and loops and things like that I could attach to given shapes. So like, a cube shape with this material makes this sound, and a cone shape makes a different sound. And you can use the spatial audio to kind of combine them together in scenes.
And as you're looking at shapes, things happen, or just the presence of those shapes causes sounds to occur?
I think just the presence of the shapes. I don't think I can actually trigger, based on a look alone, I can't trigger any kind of action.
Okay, because you need a tap with a look.
You need some kind of gesture, yeah.
Yeah. And then have you considered from Project Graveyard rain?
Yeah, could definitely do rain. A lot of visual effects. I'd love to find a good atmospheric fog technique for Vision OS. Things like that would be really good.
For the music, since this is a fully immersive space, you'd have to integrate with either Apple Music or Spotify. Is that accurate? Because you couldn't just play music and have it keep playing in here, could you?
Yeah, you can have it keep playing.
You can.
That's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Okay. Because I thought with fully immersive, it kind of takes over all the audio. It kind of pauses things.
If your app is playing audio, then it will. So in iOS terms, we have like, I forget the exact API terms, but there's an audio session that takes over the main audio session for the device, but there's also like background or ambient sounds. So, when I had made an iOS game in 2016, I made that game as like a fidget toy when I'm listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
So any sound effects I had would kind of play as an ambient source, so the podcast could keep playing in Overcast. So you could do the same thing in Vision OS.
Yeah.
As far as I know. So
yeah, you definitely can. The one app that takes the best use of this I've seen is Portal, the PlayStation Remote Play app, where you can play the PlayStation audio in that app, and you can also be watching, Dexter on Netflix at the same time, and
nice.
So it's great because some games you want to be watching like a TV show while you're playing a game, and it's funny I said Netflix, but because I'll use forget the Supercut for that. But yeah, you can watch stuff at the same time as playing the game, which is an amazing thing. And there's a volume slider within Portal, so it can be different from the system audio, which is also very handy. And the other instance is the very buggy Paramount Plus app. I'm not sure if you've tried this, but Paramount Plus, it is a weird app. It's because it won't remember your play history within the Vision OS app. It doesn't pause other video or whatever, so you can be watching like baseball, MLB at the same time as your TV show and Paramount Plus, because it just ignores all, it'll ignore your AirPods if you have to play and pause. It's in its own little world. It's a buggy, kind of delightful mess because it's a cool ability to keep doing stuff while watching video. But anyways,
yeah. So just to give you an idea of like the atmospheres that I'm designing, whenever I'm working on this project, I'm listening to Godspeed You Black Emperor. So these are not upbeat, rosy environments. These are like bleak, depressing, horrible places. So
yeah, it'd be interesting.
But I love them.
I know you probably couldn't advertise like this is the dark side of the moon environment, but like creating environments based on albums, and I don't know. Yeah, you would get sued if you do a clever way of like you get to like decrypt a riddle to know what album you're talking about, kind of thing.
Yeah, doing a tribute versus doing something that's obviously a recreation.
Exactly. Yeah,
like I always thought a good design space to dabble in is like finding photos of old trapper keepers from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
and just like grab all those colors and weird shapes, or like VHS boxes, things like that.
Yeah.
Just
Trapper keepers. Do kids still, I don't know, do they still use those? I guess so.
I don't know.
No, I don't know. They still take notes on their iPads used to. Yeah.
So Dark Spaces is, it's, essentially I'm going to work on, getting 5 or 6 environments together, and then in kind of a shell of an application around them where you can transition from a window into one of the spaces, and then maybe from space to space, things like that. And then as soon as I get it that far along, I'll probably open up a test flight to let people get in and start experimenting with it. And
one thing I'd encourage you to have as an option with this project is just a very simple plain text window that as an option for thinking, like just like have a way to just input text that is there.
Okay.
Because I think like there's not a ton. There's very few like writing apps in Vision OS. That's like shocking to me. Like there really are. Like Everlog is my favorite writing app in Vision OS because like it's a journaling app. It's a Markdown journaling app, but there's just not a lot of writing tools. So just something just plain where people could just like be in a dark space and write in like plain text or Markdown, I think would be a successful thing to have out there, because so many people love to write in Vision OS, but there's just like there's there's just not very many good solutions, and having this in a nice chill environment would be just, I think, perfect, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The kind of experience that I'm making is kind of similar to a meditation app or a mindfulness app, but I don't want you to clear your mind or any of that stuff. I use these spaces of like, I'm going here and I'm thinking about hard problems. Like when I'm stuck
Yeah.
on something at work, I'm going to grab the headset and enter an environment and sit on the floor for 10 minutes and just think the problem through. And so, yeah, having a way to just, pop up in a note or maybe just like tap on an object and dictate something and just have it disappear. And you don't even show that in the app. And just after you leave the session, here's the notes that you took.
Yeah,
Something
and it
like
can
that
even
could be
sync
good.
like to iCloud, and then you can see in the Files app on your phone, here are the notes from that app,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, but I don't want to turn this into a productivity thing.
Right.
It would be a kind of a
Jotting notes down, just quick ideas kind of thing, yeah. No, I totally get
maybe
that ambition.
maybe like
yeah.
echoing into the void, like shouting
Right.
your ideas into the void.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
very cool. Oh, that would be interesting. Is there a way to like, you got a microphone, like as you're talking to yourself, make it simulate that you're in this echoey environment or something of the
Oh,
nature?
probably.
Like try to, have your different spaces, have different soundscapes. And I don't know if you'd want to do this, but have like your own audio in some kind of like echoing back
Yeah.
in some way. Yeah.
I haven't. I know you can do stuff with audio. I've not played with audio on Vision OS yet, so I'm just speculating on all of this. But I know you can do some stuff with audio and kind of route it through other processes in Vision OS, just like in iOS. So there's a WebXR site or WebXR project called Screamatorium, which is one of my favorite like gimmicky little things where basically you put the headset on, you go into a VR space, you're in an entirely white box and you just start screaming and it throws paintballs from your face and just like highlights the environment with these paintballs.
Oh, that's
and
so
the color
cool.
of the paintball is kind of the frequency at which you're yelling.
That reminds me of the X-Men where the guy's learning to fly with his voice. Imagine a game where you're like doing that kind of like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I was playing around. This would actually be a fun way to do this. There are games out there where you can kind of control a character with the pitch of your voice or the volume of your voice.
Yeah.
And doing that in Vision OS would be particularly fun. So like trying to land a rocket, be like,
right. Yeah. That'd be very cool. It limits where you can play that without annoying everyone in the house, but it'd be very cool as a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually working on something yesterday for one of the gesture labs, and I had accidentally messed up the math of a gesture in such a way that it became very fun. So I've got this kind of overcompensating like rubber band effect where I could drag a little rocket around from Reality Composer Pro and drag it through my scene, but it would just go way too far in any direction. So I'd have to like really finely control my movements and kind of like move it around to like, okay, I can actually turn this into a fun little mini game of like, go ahead and try to land this rocket and just like,
yeah. Have you ever played Octodad?
No.
So you're like this octopus dad. It's like the whole gimmick of it is it's really hard to control character kind of thing. Like it reminds me a little bit of that. Like there's definitely fun mechanics that can go along with that. And I know most of the VR platforms have a bar fight simulator, and like I've never played that one, but I'm assuming you're probably drunk in that experience. Yeah. Any retrospective stuff on a year with the Apple Vision Pro? Like, how's this first year been in your mind, and how do you hope the next 12 months will play out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Apple Vision Pro is pretty much where I thought it would be. I think the way that people talk about it is kind of hilarious. People frame it as a total flop. But I just don't see it that way. When we were leading up to the launch last year, there was all these rumors that Apple could only make 400,000 of them. So there was going to be, they're never going to sell more than that because, they're supply constrained.
Yeah, we were all very worried. Let's get the orders in right away because they're going to sell out and be back ordered.
And since then, that same number, they've sold around 400,000, and now they've only sold 400,000, so the entire product is a flop.
Yeah.
Like, this is a multi-billion-dollar product line with very high profit margins. I don't see how that's a flop. Now, there's a lot they can do, with the App Store and for developers to make a better content ecosystem. I think that's probably the roughest part right now, particularly for consumers. But in the enterprise and business world, people love it. There's a lot of stuff in the works there. Particularly being at the MIT Hackathon, very few people there were interested in making consumer-based apps. They were interested in making stuff for work, for enterprises, for large organizations, for governments, things like that. I think Apple,
and that's where Tim Cook has said. Tim Cook has said it's big in enterprise, and yeah, he's probably knows a lot of data on that stuff.
Yeah, there's actually an MIT medical hack with Vision Pro happening right now. It's like a 6-week thing. I'm not involved in it, but I was talking to some of the organizers of that when I was in Boston. So I know Apple's heavily involved in that one. But yeah, so I think it's where I wanted it to be. I obviously have a ton of stuff I wish that developer relations would do better. I hope the documentation gets better. I hope we get a ton of new features in visionOS 3. I hope we start to see a second gen come out this year, next year. Even if it's just the same headset with a little bit lighter materials, I would be very happy.
Yeah, I'd be curious if they change the strap inclusions, that top strap that they're selling now and stuff like that. And we saw that they released a Vision Fit Test app. I need to download this still, but it looks like they're gearing up towards letting Best Buy sell these things, which good. Yeah, let's have this be available in more places where Best Buy people go there, the home theater department, and spend a crap ton of money getting their home theater set up, and maybe those same people would want this as well.
Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul. I'm making StepInto.Vision not necessarily for the audience that we have now, but for that audience of developers coming in over the next 2 to 5 years. As we go, I think right now the entire active visionOS community is maybe 1,000 developers, and that could go to 100,000 in 5 years. And by developers, I mean not necessarily just individuals, but studios, businesses, things like that. So I am definitely trying to make stuff with StepInto.Vision to be as useful as possible when those people show up. I know a lot of our audience are Swift developers, so people will recognize a site like Hacking with Swift from Paul Hudson. His site has always been really useful, particularly for Swift UI development, where you can Google pretty much anything related to Swift UI and you will see one of his links in the top results.
And your vision for StepInto.Vision is kind of that for visionOS developers.
Yeah, focusing specifically, taking that same concept of small bite-sized example code, like how do I use this modifier, or how do I use this instance method, or this technique in Reality Kit, or this feature of Reality Composer Pro. And just, if you look at my examples, none of them would take you more than 2 minutes to read. And that's the point. I'm not trying to consume your time. I'm trying to get you the answer as quickly as possible so you can bounce and get back to work. So that's the goal there. I do have one thing to plug on StepInto.Vision. For any developers listening, we started a StepInto.Vision office hours. We've done 3 beta sessions so far, and tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time is the first official version. So if you go to StepInto.Vision, there is a header at the top with a link to an About Office Hours page. It's got the event details, how to join. We have a private LinkedIn group where we share the links to the meetings, some rules, a place to submit topics and things like that. But this is not an event per se. This is a hangout. We're not recording this for YouTube or anything like that. It is just a conversation of developers who are talking about what they're working on, or getting help from one another, or hey, has anybody worked with this API, or how do I export assets in such a way that I can host them and throw them into my app later, things like that.
Very cool. So this is every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern in the last 1.5 to 2 hours, generally speaking. So check out StepInto.Vision, and it's one of the first things on that page to kind of learn more about that. And it sounds like a great resource and a way to kind of bounce ideas off each other. And this is over Zoom, right? And
Yep.
Zoom has a Vision OS app. How good is that? Have you done much with that?
So it does work with spatial personas. Or it works with personas, but not in the spatial mode like FaceTime does. So I can be in, I'll be in office hours in the headset, and I also have my Mac running a version as well, so I can do screen sharing if needed. But
are people joining
app,
in personas, generally speaking? Is that a common thing?
I would say about half.
Yeah. Okay.
The nice thing about it is they do have an immersive environment, so you can just look at the Zoom window. It's just a regular window with like, whoever's speaking in large and like small tiles for the other attendees. But you can also tap into an immersive environment where it throws everything up on a huge grid in this kind of virtual studio.
Nice.
So it's particularly if you've got 20 or 30 people, break them all out into tiles, things like that. They could definitely do more. I hope Apple opens up the ability for third-party developers to use spatial personas in the same way that FaceTime can.
That'd be cool.
That would be
because it's a great experience, and I'm sure they'll have limits on how many can go at the same time. But that'd be awesome if Zoom could do that, for instance. Yeah,
we did a couple of beta tests with FaceTime with using personas. There's a couple limitations. Only the first 4 or 5 people get personas. Everybody else just gets stuck in a window. But also, FaceTime doesn't have any usernames or nicknames or anything like that. So if I share a FaceTime link and 10 people join, they're just showing up as phone numbers or emails, and you may not want
your phone number.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like, this is kind of sketchy.
Yeah, it's not quite the right tool for that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll keep that for like small breakout groups if people want to, organize privately. Like, hey, let's go have a space time around a specific topic. But yeah.
I'm very curious how this next year goes, and curious how the rollout to other retail stores goes. It'll be interesting just to see, what that experience is like trying to buy this elsewhere. It'd be interesting if I could get a replacement power cable for my Vision battery at Best Buy or something like.
Yeah, the one accessory that I would love to get is a power cord that goes directly from
the Vision Pro
power to the Vision Pro with
no battery.
Yeah, basically thinking just like keeping this device for 20 years. Eventually, this battery is going to blow up or stop working. But the headset would be fine if we can find a way to power it. And I know the battery's doing some weird conversions.
Yeah, the battery's a bit interesting, and I wonder if once the battery gets totally toast, if it just worked through as a pass-through thing, and it'll be interesting. I do like that the battery's external, because it's like with the Meta, it's like your headset's totally toast at that point.
Yeah.
Anyways, so StepInto.Vision is the site to check out. Anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
No, I think that'll do it.
Cool. And then if you want to listen to our previous conversation, that is episode 22. So if you want more of this kind of chat with about 6 months ago, episode 22 is the episode to check out. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been great catching up.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, that's my interview with Joseph. My thanks again to Joseph for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at visionpros.fm/Patreon. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show. And if you haven't left a review yet, I'd really appreciate you heading over to Apple Podcasts to leave a quick review. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.